Welcome back, everyone. It is I, Paul, your host of the late night. Like, it's not even late night. It's too early.
Reset,
Yeah.
redo.
Take 84. Um, Welcome back, everyone. It is your host, Paul, here on the Last Call Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm alongside me tonight is my co-host, Bobby Briscoe. Bobby, how we doing tonight?
Doing good today. I had a bit of a cold that set me back last week, but I'm better now, and I'm excited to talk about some football.
Fantastic. Nothing makes me happier than to hear that you're back on the mend. It was a little bit boring and a little bit lonely having to do a couple pods over the last 2 weeks on my own. So it's nice to not be screaming into the void about football and have someone else to bounce ideas off of. So welcome
I will
back.
scream along with you.
Yeah, and we're here on what is it, March 2nd. You'll anyone that's watching this will probably see it tomorrow. Uh, Sorry about last week. I had recorded on the Monday. I thought I had scheduled it to be released on the Tuesday. Turns out it was released on the Wednesday. Next thing you know, it was a busy end of the week, so I didn't get around to a second episode. So apologies for missing out on that, but that means we just have all the more football to talk tonight. So before we get too far ahead of ourselves, cheers, Bobby. It's last call. So going into tonight's episode, there's obviously a lot that has happened. We have the results from the NFL Combine, so we'll be touching on that. We'll touch on some news as well, and then what we want to do is, I think each week between now and the NFL Draft, I want to kind of go through each division and break down some of the biggest moving pieces of each team within that division. And I figured there's no better division to start with than the NFC North, with that being the division of your favorite team, Bobby, the Green Bay Packers. So I'll be excited to hear your thoughts on that. Did you have a chance to take a look at any of the combine stuff?
You know what? No, I didn't get a chance to see it. I was talking to one of my good friends and now league mate of ours in our dynasty league, Jack Patterson, today at the office at work. And he put it very nicely. He said, "You know what? If I want to watch people work out, I'll just go to the gym." But it's good to see the results. I do like paying attention to the results and checking out the numbers and those sorts of things. That kind of stuff I'll pay attention to from the combine, but
Yeah,
I don't sit down and watch it. I'm afraid to say.
yeah, it's a weird event when you really think about it, because
Mhm.
I think a lot of the most important stuff that goes on is actually behind closed doors, like the interviews, like the dealings between GMs and agents and coaches and all that stuff. A lot of that happens outside of the actual uh, TV broadcast that they end up putting on for 4 days while guys run around in their underwear, effectively.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, and you know what? I thought of it today. I'm like, you know what? As much as that is the case, what is the thing that we all just like overreact to the moment it's done? It's the 40 times. It's the record-breaking jumps. It's,
Mhm.
all these players that are probably going to fall to the third day of the draft, but oh my God, he ran a 4.26, so you know what that means.
Mhm. I will say these are the kinds of events that I love the behind the scenes coverage of, for exactly what you just mentioned, the interviews, the stories that come out. It's the kind of event where you'd love to be a fly on the wall, just listening to what's going on in those different draft rooms and with each of those different teams. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, no, interesting event,
Yeah.
if not the most easy to televise event.
Yeah, and it's funny, like they don't really show a lot of the drills anymore. It's really just the 40. It's, the change of direction drills that they get the DBs going. Maybe the gauntlet for the receivers, but they don't show a lot of the jumps unless it's a replay. They don't show the bench press. They don't show all these other things that people are might be interested in. I don't know, but it
You can only watch somebody repping 225 so many times.
yeah, and we'll get into more about the combine as we get into that coverage of it. So let's start with some news that's gone down over the past 5 days or so. It sounds like the Cowboys are going to be signing Javonte Williams, so congratulations to him. 3-year deal, $24 million. I think that's guaranteed money. Probably with some
16 million of it is guaranteed,
16.
from
Okay,
what I
thank you.
understand. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's still a big payday for a running back who was thought to be dead in the water, 2 seasons ago, before he had his resurgence last season with the Cowboys. So happy for him. Second round pick out of North Carolina 4 or 5 years ago now, and I'm excited to see what he can do with this new lease on life with the Cowboys with that beefed up offensive line and another year in the system.
I'm really curious, and this kind of gets into one of our next news items as well, with George Pickens having the franchise tag slapped upon him too. I'm curious of what their cap situation is going to look like, because they're going to need to move some dollars around. They are currently sitting 58 million over the cap, so
Whew.
some stuff's going to need to change there in Dallas
Yeah.
before they can get cap compliant.
Yeah, I guess you restructure Dak, you restructure CD. You don't have to pay Micah, but then yeah, to your point, like you need to clear up a lot of space if you want. I think that there's a what's his name? What's the defensive lineman they traded from they got back from the Packers initially? Was that Rashawn not Rashawn Gary? Oh my gosh, something Jenkins? Anyway, he could be a cap casualty, and that would save them $22 million. Like there's things they can do. There always is. But to your point, let's just get into it. Like George Pickens getting franchise tagged, it's either usually the way the franchise tag usually works for these teams. For those that don't know, is you can tag a player and they'll be guaranteed a salary in cash that will be the average of the top 5 paid contracts at that position. So he'll be a handsomely paid receiver for 1 year. But usually, what happens is they'll franchise tag him, so they give themselves a bit more of a runway in order to give him an extension. But that is not ever, a certainty when it comes to the Cowboys and Jerry Jones.
No, of course not. Kenny Clark was the name that you were trying to think of. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And as much as they would probably love to have him back, like you can't pay him at that number with their situation. And I guess like the fallout from all of it, if you really want to get into it, is like I mean, the Bengals just did this. They paid their quarterback and their 2 top receivers, and it is a road you can go down, but then you have to be hitting in your drafts on the defensive side of the ball, which I mean the Cowboys have done a pretty good job in the draft recently, so I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for them to get things back on track. But their defense was just as bad as the Bengals was last year, and it shows up when you don't pay the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. They're going to have to get creative, and yeah, they'll have to jettison some more bodies. I'll be curious to see how this ends up falling out, because yeah, there could be some talent available off of that roster, which is not something that I'm sure Dallas Cowboys fans want to be facing down the barrel of, especially if you're looking at moving anything off of the defensive side of the ball. But
Yeah,
from George Pickens' perspective, this is kind of interesting, because in a lot of cases we've seen players be very upset to be franchised and to have that restriction placed on them. But I kind of wonder if this is maybe not necessarily the worst deal for George Pickens, especially given that there's a number of important wide receiver contracts to be settled in the next little while. And kicking that can down the road a year for him might not be the worst deal, especially if you're signing a deal after Puka Nacua gets his contract, for instance, and you see what he makes, right?
very true, very true. And I think he doesn't want to leave Dallas. I mean, once you've once you've had the beginning of your career in Pittsburgh and you see how great things are outside of it, I don't think you want to take the chance on not signing the franchise tag. It is a lot of money, and it is used as, like I said, like a runway for them to get a deal done. And I think the other point here is that to your like you already brought up, like not everybody's like, thrilled to be playing on a 1-year deal. Like they want the commitment, they want guaranteed money into the future. Um, it'll be curious. Like, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he makes of it. And this could all just be another Jerry Jones farce where it's free PR for the next 6 months. But we've seen these players, these really talented receivers, especially if they don't like. Think of Terry McLaurin last year. He held out, wanted more money, didn't get a training camp, didn't get practice all the way up to like a week or two before the season started. And what happens? You get soft tissue injuries. You get, you're not on time and on pace with your quarterback, so things don't look right. All these things can kind of fall into the season if you don't take the initiative and try to get things done ahead of time. Um, that's, I guess, the last point I have on that. And I hope Jerry Jones has maybe learned from his mistakes and get things done sooner. Or maybe he just likes the circus, and that's the way that he likes to operate.
This is Jerry Jones that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So I think that there's always going to be an amount of circus going on down there while he's around. But
Yeah.
um,
Savvy Jerry Jones, who got 2 first-round picks and had a crystal ball reading tell him that Michael Parsons wasn't going to make it through the season for your guys, unfortunately.
well, yeah, listen.
Uh, no one knows. It's just bad luck. Um,
Exactly. We'll get into that later.
Yeah. The final piece here, I mean, really quickly, Anthony Richardson has been granted permission to seek a trade. The former number 4 overall pick for the Colts, just an injury-riddled first 3 years, not really seeing the results and progression that you would hope for from one of the most athletic quarterbacks that's ever been drafted. Um, I don't know what kind of landing place would work well for him. I don't think anyone's trading for him to be a starter, though.
We might talk about one when we get into the NFC previews here, because there's one in the NFC North that might be a candidate. But
Okay.
yeah, it's an interesting situation for him. No matter where he lands, there's such high expectations for him coming into Indianapolis, and it just did not happen there for him.
There were flashes, though, right? Like,
Mhm. Yep.
I think everybody probably remembers one of the best passes of 2024 when he's falling backwards from his own 40 and puts a 60-yard pass right on Alec Pierce for a touchdown.
Hmm.
Like, those are things he's capable of. And then unfortunately he just can't create a 5-yard complete a 5-yard out. So these things need to be fixed, and hopefully he can find another lease on life somewhere else. The last piece here, the actual last piece of news that's worthy of being mentioned, is Aaron Jones. It's been reported that he will likely be released if a trade partner can't be found, which I think is tomorrow, not the day of like the start of the league year where these kind of things kind of happen. So we might know tomorrow if he's going to
Hmm.
be
Yeah.
released.
Yeah, when this episode comes out, it might be that new people in the future might already know what has transpired here. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, interesting situation with him too. He's 31. He's getting up there. I would love to see him come back with my Packers, just for the sake of absolutely love the person and who he is and who he's been for the organization. But I don't know how much gas is left in that tank as a running back anymore, unfortunately. So, yeah, could be getting towards the end here for Aaron Jones, unfortunately, and we'll see if there's a team that will end up taking him. But
And just unlucky timing too, with a really loaded running back free agency class. So if you have
mhm.
any questions about my opinions on the running back free agency class, watch last week's episode. I think it's one that is exactly what's needed for the NFL, with the draft class being a little bit weaker at running back, and it could be a season where running backs in free agency do get some money. Let's get into the meat of it here. Well, the first piece of meat on the sandwich, and I think, I mean, if you want to go in-depth analysis on some of the results and some of the like crazy outlier performances that some of these players were able to put up during the combine, there's a million and one podcast that will do that. I don't think it's worthy talking about players who performed like combine kings just for them to fall to the fifth and sixth rounds. I think what I want to do tonight, before guys start falling into draft place after the NFL draft, I just want to go through kind of maybe the stock up and stock down for some of the top fantasy rookies that we expect to be in that first round of dynasty drafts, and see maybe what's been solidified and if there's been any movement. So, what are your thoughts here on Jeremiah Love, Bobby?
Okay, but before we get to that, can
Okay.
I just acknowledge one outlier performance? This Sonny Styles linebacker,
Oh yeah.
just absolutely tearing it up in every category. And for a linebacker, hey, that's great. That is actually something that's maybe potentially relevant, just being an absolute physical freak. But yeah, Jeremiah Love. You have the stats here in the show notes. So
Yeah.
4:36:40. That's
I
it's a
think that
speed.
I think that's faster than what I thought. And I think a lot of people
Mhm.
thought he would be in that 4.4 range. So for him
Mhm.
to get down into the mid 4.6 4.3s, like that's a check mark, and I think it gets some teams excited, right? Like,
Mhm.
oh man, I knew he was
Yeah,
fast. I didn't know he was that fast.
that's second among all the running backs who ran a 40 at the combine. So not everybody, of course, shows up, and not everybody does everything, but that's pretty good.
Yeah. The size, we get the official sizes from these guys now, which is helpful. So 6 foot 212, that's good size. Obviously, I highlighted the production from him in college. I think all of this just solidifies him as the 101 in your dynasty drafts. And I guess the question is, how high are NFL teams going to be willing to take him after a performance like this? He didn't do a lot of the other drills. It was really just the 40, and then he kind of
Mhm.
said, "Peace, I'm out."
Yeah.
But I think that certainly helps, right?
Yeah, it certainly does. And I mean, running backs are always a tricky position if they're going to go, day one of the draft or not. It's really such a team, not only a team need, but a team assessment of risk as well, right? Is this a need, and is this a need that we can fill later too, right?
Yeah.
So we'll see where he ends up going and how high he ends up actually going. But I agree. I think barring an exceptional circumstance or a crazy league rule or something like that, you're probably looking at him as your 1-1 in a dynasty rookie draft this year.
Yeah, I mean, some rumors that have come out already are the Giants and John Harbaugh already saying that he wants to solidify and find a bell cow running back. I don't think I can't imagine the Giants taking him at 5 is the proper answer for a team that is so bad and has so
No,
many
and for
needs.
a team that just got Scadaboo too,
Right.
right? Like, do you
Yeah.
really need to be going and getting another top end running back?
Yeah.
Question mark.
Yeah, and like Scadaboo and Tyron Tracy were a good 1-2 last year. So assuming it sounds like Scadaboo will be ready for week 1, he'll be ready for training camp potentially. Those are all good signs for that. Again, I think a team that has so many other needs would not think about a position like running back, especially at number 5 overall in the draft. Um, Other teams that have been rumored, you get the Saints, you get the Chiefs. I mean, those are teams that feel like, I mean, the Saints feel like they're trending the right way. Kamara's aging out. It could be a potential good landing spot, potentially for the Saints. I think it's another team though that was, for a lot of the last part of the season last year was literally drafting in the top 3 until they had that hot streak towards the end of the
Yeah.
season. So I imagine they have other needs. The Chiefs, they've been looking for that receiving type running back for years. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was a bust, but it was something that they coveted, and I
Mhm.
think that would be obviously a fun spot. So it's just a matter of how high he goes, and I don't think
Yeah.
there's a lot else to say about it.
The Chiefs do intrigue me because they are a team that is going to, they have a window that's kind of closing on them right now. Their quarterback is obviously still who he is, but Kelsey is, not long for this league at this point. And they've had such issue with trying to cobble together talent around those core 2 players too. The last couple of years, they've made it work, but it seems like they're fitting in puzzle pieces everywhere. So maybe going with somebody with, high offensive upside to, add another core piece for a while could be
Yeah,
something that they're interested in.
Yeah.
We'll
I,
see.
but as good as they've been for the the last 10 years, it feels like now, they still they're missing that. They are missing like pieces that I think a Super Bowl contending team should have. Like they don't,
Yeah.
like Chris Jones is aging out, so they probably need a defensive player. They've never had that X receiver. They've never figured it out. It feels like
Yeah.
since Tyreek Hill left, just a winner downfield. They've tried with these little guys and it's not working. So maybe that's a good segue into our next player here, Carnell Tate, who was my wide receiver one, based on my uh, projections and my uh, stacking of the receivers. He ends up just doing the 40-yard dash, if I'm not mistaken, and it was kind of a head scratcher to me because I thought he would run in the 4.4s. I think a lot of people did. He definitely had the body language of someone who was upset with the time. He ends up running a 4.53, and I mean the conspiracies are already out on why this might be the case, but like what's your take on this, Bobby? Do you think it's going to affect
Yeah,
his draft stock?
not a ton. This is always, and this is kind of a maybe more of a broad thing with the combine, generally speaking. I don't know that, a kind of one off bad result is going to completely tank you the same way that, a one off good result is going to not necessarily make you either. But it is something that gives that question mark, right? Like what's going on here? Why did this happen? And teams will know more based on interactions with him and that kind of thing too. But yeah, it's puzzling. I'm looking at the list of wide receivers in the 40 here right now, and on the NFL's page of wide receivers, he's not even on that page because his time is so low. So
Yeah,
it's not ideal.
it's funny. It's always hilarious. I don't know why I can't learn my own lessons here because, as you know, that having operated in our dynasty league with me for 5 seasons now, Bobby, I usually treat draft capital like nothing. Like if I need to go get a player, I have no problem trading my draft picks away. And I'm like, oh, you know what, this 2026 draft seems pretty weak, so I don't mind getting rid of my first round pick, and if anything, I can recoup it later. And then, of course, as you get closer and closer to the draft, combine goes through, you're like, oh, wow, all these players are a lot more athletic than I thought. And I'm sure that's all going to, like, everything's, what's the word I'm looking for? Everything is, God, I can't think of the word right now. Everything has to be put in relative, like, comparables. I can't think of the word,
Yeah,
but
put into
so
comparison with
yeah, so
with each
like
other. Yeah,
the top 5 receivers this year, they're going to be the top 5 receivers in this draft, but maybe they don't stack up as well as the top 5 receivers from 2 years ago or whatever, right? So one thing I heard about Carnell Tate as a potential conspiracy theory was like, so the 40 is now digitally collected by lasers on both sides at the start and the finish, and the timer starts when your plant hand comes up off the ground. That triggers the laser. And what people were saying is he was lifting his hand before he was really getting started, whereas a lot of other runners of the 40 were, you know, corking themselves up or setting themselves up and swinging their arm back and then lifting their hand late. That could be a tenth of a second potentially. Oh, hey, Catherine.
hi Catherine.
Okay, can you go to bed then? Can you read your own book? Remember how I told you that Daddy needs to be left alone for right now? Can you just go find a book and give Daddy 5 minutes, okay? We'll take a little break and I can read you a book real quick. All right, good night. Okay. There might be a little bit of editing in this one.
Yeah, there might be.
Um,
That's okay.
so I want to get your. I don't know what you've seen or heard about Makai Lemon because he was a lot of people's wide receiver one, uh, from a production standpoint and his potential, and his comp was always like Amon-Ra St. Brown or somewhere on that spectrum between Amon-Ra St. Brown and Khalil Shakir. Have you had a chance to see anything like news related come out of about him?
I have not, unfortunately. I've seen him on the draft boards throughout the year, and I do have him now more as a two, but no, I haven't seen any. He's kind of a bit of a mystery to me still at this point.
Sure. So he didn't participate in any of the drills, which was already a bit of a red flag for me because if you're good at any of those things, you want to like especially in a wide receiver class where there's really no defined number one, you can actually go out and show, here's what I do really well. Here's my superpower. And he didn't do anything. And there's no injury related to it, I believe. But apparently did not perform well in the interviews. And then also got up on the podium and was when he was addressing the media. I don't know if you saw any of these videos, but he's kind of like looking seductively at the media and like bobbing his head around, like just trying to exude confidence, I think. But it really came
Mm,
off as like making people uncomfortable.
right.
So just it was a funny little quirk of this year's combine, I think. And I mean, I just watched a couple mock drafts today after the combine, and people don't even have him going in the first round anymore as a result of like the lack of testing and the just like the feedback coming from some of these interviews. So we're gonna have to see what happens on draft night for him
Yeah.
to maintain any sort of dynasty value.
Yeah, that is one of the things. I'm glad you brought that up because like what happens on draft day makes such a big impact in terms of the dynasty value. So if a team takes a chance on him and he finds himself in a sweet landing spot, then immediately boom, back up the chart you go, right? If that's not the case, then maybe it's right to be fading him down into the lower rounds.
Absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, interesting, weird,
Yeah, and
weird, weird,
like
weird, weird.
not a lot else we can really say about it because he didn't do any of the drills. So it's all going to fall onto his pro day, and it's going to fall onto the late April when the draft is called. Let's get to the next receiver here.
One last thing on
Oh,
him though,
sure.
I'm just looking at some stats, and this is interesting. Only dropped 4 targets on 138 targets in college, so does not drop the ball,
The
and
the
that's something that a team might see and go, yeah, we'll take somebody who can be in the slot and just make a catch.
definitely can't question his production. I think he tested or ended up with a production score as like the number one receiver in this class. So the production you can't question.
Mhm.
It's gonna be a what's your flavor, what's your favorite when it comes to wide receivers in this draft because there are a number of good ones and they keep on climbing up boards now. Like the receiver group, much to my chagrin in our dynasty league, I mean not thankfully, but because we're resetting, I don't have to suffer the consequences of having given up all my draft picks because because these guys, wide receivers are just going to continue to be good coming into the draft. So,
Mhm.
um,
And as the person with all your draft picks, I'm a little disappointed, but that's okay.
like I said, it wasn't my first choice. I wanted to do the expansion. Next guy up, Jordan Tyson. Again, not a lot to say here. We can kind of speed through some of these ones just because there's not a lot to talk about. We're just gonna have to look back at the tape. And for him, did not participate in any of the drills. He's dealing with a hamstring injury apparently, so maybe he's gonna wait for his pro day. Maybe and he's dealt with injuries for most of his career now, unfortunately. But another potential wide receiver one in this
Mhm.
draft who people are going to have to look back at last year's tape even to see what they think of this guy.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's when that kind of thing happens when there's injuries in the draft year. It does make it more difficult because you're looking at that year-old tape. He could. That's always the kind of player that I like to keep an eye on because I find and this happens in hockey too, actually. These players who have weird things happen in their draft year that are either injury related or whatever it happens to be. That's where maybe a steal can be found, where the talent's there, the ability's there, and once they get over the hump of whatever was holding them down around now and prevented them from being at that combine or having the numbers that they maybe could have had in their draft year, teams can capitalize on that, and that's where you can have players end up finding really good landing spots too,
Yeah,
right? So
no,
maybe a player to keep an eye on in that regard.
yeah, I mean, this is why I think I have Carnell Tate as my wide receiver one because he doesn't have a lot of these injury red flags as it stands, and you know what you're getting. He's a sure thing. He's going to play the X potentially, or at least be a downfield receiver for you. But to your point, if he goes high to a team that maybe doesn't have the best situation, does that change how these guys all stack up? And if Jordan Tyson doesn't get a chance to put anything on paper for his workouts, and he ends up falling to the Bills or a team that wants one of these big X receivers, that changes everything. Like things could shift certainly now between now and April, where we have 2 months to talk all about it. Kenyon Sadiq, another absolute freak, tight end out of Oregon, put up a combine, and I wish I could throw the graphic up here, but it's something like he ran a 4.3940. I think he weighed in at just under 6'4", 244 pounds, tight end. He ran a 4.3940, which made him faster than Odell Beckham Jr. He had a 4.35 vertical, 43 and a half inch vertical, which was better than, I forget who it was. It was better than like whomever. And then 11.1 foot broad jump, which was better than Julio Jones. And then he put up 26 reps on the bench, which was better than like 3 reps better than the latest great tight end prospect who did the bench. I forget what it was, but he just killed the combine, and I think people knew that. But the production was not necessarily there over the last 2 seasons out of Oregon. So, what do you make of this guy?
Yeah, absolute physical freak. With a tight end, that's a little bit more of a help because you need them blocking sometimes, right? That's I know, with the way offenses have gone, we talked about it in the first podcast that we did. The tight end position is used a little bit differently in different sets these days, but if a tight end can be on the field every play because they're also an excellent blocker because they're a just animal out there, then that's a big factor. Now I haven't seen any tape. I'm not sure what how his blocking looks, but
Yeah, so I have to probably do some retcon here because when I talked about him during my first round rookie draft, I talked about him as not necessarily a good performer in the blocking category, but having gone back and kind of learned some things and watched a little bit more tape, he's a willing blocker. Like he is able to hold his own and actually have some significant results on the blocking side of things. And I think before we get into our final prospect here, I'm going to make sure my daughter gets to bed, and then we'll finish up the podcast with the NFC North. So just hang on. We'll be back in a sec. All right, sorry about that, everyone. Child has been successfully put to sleep, so we can get through the rest of our episode now. Uh, Last prospect I wanted to quickly mention because he's kind of on my radar. I kind of have my Denzel Boston watch ongoing as this offseason continues. He came in at 6'4", 212 pounds, was a really smooth route runner, had a 35-inch vert, which I thought was a little bit low. But you know what? He makes up for it with the size. Um, and outside of that, apparently I didn't get a chance to watch many of the drills that he participated in, but apparently was a little bit slow, decelerating. I'll probably have to go back and watch a little bit of that just because I've kind of put my flag on this player as a prospect I really like. So we'll see what ends up happening with him over the next 2 months. But a prospect I was really a fan of, but
yeah.
did not perform at the combine.
Yeah, I don't think he ran the 40, which is interesting because that says that team didn't think that he would run the 40 well enough to want to do it. So,
Right.
yeah, I'm not going to have him flagged myself as of right now. But also we've talked about it all day. Kind of the player will you'll see the landing spot and then go from there. But could be a steal depending on situation. Could also be the kind of guy that kind of falls off depending on situation. So
Yeah, not a player that's going to be like to your point. Kenyon Sadiq, I don't think is going to be a discounted player anymore. I think I had him mocked to the Denver Broncos, where it's the second, one of the last picks of the first round. I wouldn't be surprised if he jumps up into the middle of the first round after a performance like that at the combine. So there's certainly, I think there is a point of this exercise that you and I are doing, which is kind of identifying the winners and the losers of the combine. Like there is going to be some shifting around draft boards based on these performances because it's not for a for a scout or a general manager to look at a player and say, "Wow, he's a really good player on tape. I wonder if he's a good athlete." And then
Yeah.
for both those things to get checked, that's kind of the point of the
Yeah.
exercise, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And just, if we can peel back even a little bit more and think in broad terms of dynasty, and, you're looking at who are you going to pick up in a startup like we're about to do, or in your rookie draft, or even in a redraft league where, you're in a late round and you need to throw a dart at someone who can maybe be of relevance. Paying attention to these kinds of things and having a finger on the pulse can give you a in of, okay, I have a name in mind when I'm throwing that dart as to who has potential upside, right? And upside at a combine can lead to upside later on once they're in the NFL, right? If they have that
Yeah.
physical ability. So
A lot of these guys are still young. Like they'll have 3 or 4 more years until they're fully developed men. Like the this is just it's all about projection at this point. And I do like your point. I appreciate you bringing it up because I had it on my list of things to mention, but I forgot is where guys are going to go in dynasty now. That's going to shift too. Like to your point, maybe Jeremiah Love was a back end of the second round pick for a dynasty startup draft, and now I wouldn't be surprised if he creeps up towards the front end of the second round, even into the first round. Like he's going to be a young, dynamic, well tested, well performing athlete and football player. So we'll have to keep an eye on how these stocks go up and down.
yeah, I will say the last thing is maybe a word of caution. Don't over pay attention to the fluctuations in stocks. I remember when we started up our league the first time, I got a guy by the name of Jamar Chase, probably a little bit later than he should have gone because he was dropping some balls in camp. So, don't overread into these things, but it's good to be aware of, the general trends and where things are going over time.
Yeah, another decision I made in past drafts that continues to haunt me today.
Let's stop
Right.
bringing these up. That's I've hit my quota for today.
No, like even in my keeper league, I took Kyle Pitts over him in our keeper league draft that rookie year, and I'm anyway. Let's not talk about it. Okay, so the second piece of uh, content we want to get through today, as part of our I guess march towards the NFL draft, is just going through these divisions and highlighting some of the quick, I guess the most important things that we need to discuss for these teams as they go into the draft, whether they're positions of need, major changes in the coaching staff, and maybe some player movement as well. So let's start with the Detroit Lions, who finished with I guess a lot of Detroit fans would probably consider a disappointing record of 9-8. However, I would probably say the roster itself is in pretty good shape. Um, Stable roster, a lot of returning players. They've locked up their key guys. The one thing we're going to have to keep an eye on is any movement along that offensive line. Obviously, they lost their center last season, which was a huge, I think, blow to this offense in Ragnow, who retired. Their left tackle, I've heard, is potentially thinking about retiring. So any more losses along that offensive line are certainly something that I don't know they're going to have a contingency plan for. And then what happened last year, in my opinion, is just the defense got so obliterated by injuries yet again. Hopefully, they can come back healthy and perform at least to a middle of the pack way. Anything on those first 2 points, Bob, you want to touch on with the Lions?
Yeah, the injuries were certainly a thing that was a big factor. I think, to your point, they're probably happy that they have a stable roster for the most part. Now they'll need to. They're another team that's in a bit of a cap situation, and we saw the first domino fall with that, with Montgomery getting shipped out of town there
Yes.
earlier today. But I think they're happy to kind of try and run it back and hope that they don't get the same run of bad luck that they had last year, and see if things settle back into place with where they think that they are.
Yeah. And I guess the fallout from this David Montgomery trade. So breaking news today: David Montgomery was traded to the Texans for, I think it was a fourth round pick, a seventh round pick, and a toss in of an offensive lineman. Um, does Jameer Gibbs become like running back one over Bijan at this point, or are they expecting to bring someone else in? Do you think?
That's a very interesting question. If they pick somebody up, either through free agency or at the draft, then yeah, I think it's probably pretty much status quo. They had been moving towards Jameer Gibbs kind of just being the guy anyway.
Yeah,
But if they don't pick anyone up, then he is absolutely the guy all the time. And yeah, I think he's pretty close to the top anyway, but there's a good chance that he's maybe the first running back that you're looking at.
there's certainly a case to be made, and I think a big part of this too is we have to look at this offensive coordinator hiring of Drew Petzing.
Mhm.
Um, he was the offensive coordinator down in Arizona, where they featured the run game heavily until all their running backs got hurt, and he kind of fed his offense through the tight end, at least in large part, over the course of his time down in Arizona. So I guess we have to look at, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown stays the same. He's going to be your high floor, potential high ceiling wide receiver in the first round of most drafts. Curious about your thoughts on Sam Laporta, but then,
Uh, yeah, I mean, so just to go back to the OC thing here quickly, because I think that also kind of sums up my thoughts on Sam Laporta.
hmm,
I don't think this upsets the apple cart for them at all. I think this is more of a, maybe a different voice in the room, a new person giving the message, but I don't think the message for them in terms of how they're running their offense is going to change too drastically from what they've been doing the last few years. So I would rely on most of these pieces to be doing what they've done, broadly speaking.
yeah,
Reported included in that. So we'll see. We'll see if the kind of run it back approach ends up working for them.
yeah, and you think of like a Jamison Williams, who was another top 12 receiver in a year that receiving production was down in general, so he found
Mhm.
his way into the top 12 of dynasty um, producers at the wide receiver position. That there's going to be an effect on his volume, I would have to believe. Uh, yeah, I don't think you can just look at what an offensive coordinator has done in the past and say, hey, that's what's going to happen
Mhm.
again. Because if you're any good at your job, you'll adjust to the players you have on your roster. But I think some tendencies are going to leak in when it comes to a play caller. He may not even be calling the plays, if we're being honest. Like Dan
Yeah,
Campbell did so at the back half of last year.
yeah, exactly. And that's part of why I think it's going to be kind of broadly the same as what we've seen. But yeah, there's certainly will be differences. There'll be tweaks, and he'll bring his own style of things. But yeah, they're
So
an interesting team.
yeah. So what I want to do with each of these teams as we check the box on these guys is I'm just going to ask you what you think they're going to do with their first round pick. So they're drafting at 17. If you were the manager of the Detroit Lions, what position do you think you'd be drafting?
I had this written down, and I'm just scrolling to it here. Um, I'm probably grabbing somebody on the defensive side of the ball, especially somebody in the secondary, is what
Okay.
I'm thinking. That would probably be the thing I think is the need that they have that they can probably best fill with somebody from the draft.
Yeah, I've seen corner. That's definitely a good call out. I like the idea of adding another pass rusher. So it's a good draft for D tackles. If you want to add like an ass kicker, you could certainly do so at 17. So I agree with you though. Defense has to be the place that they look to.
Mhm.
Next team here, as we try to get through this before everything else. Bobby seems
I'm
excited.
excited to talk about this
Okay,
one.
so Minnesota Vikings,
Oh boy.
another team that I think had a lot of question marks going into the season with the decision on Sam Darnold and not signing him, going ahead with JJ McCarthy. So they finished at 9-8, which I honestly, when I looked at that, I thought was wrong. That because the whole story all season was how bad they were, but
Mhm.
the defense obviously did a lot of the heavy lifting, and I think a balanced approach and the emergence of a JJ McCarthy playing better at the back half of the season helped their case. But But where do you want to start with this team?
I think the only place that you can start with them is who's going to be their quarterback next year.
Okay.
That's the biggest question mark. And it's kind of an unfortunate question mark for them to have in some ways because there's other things to talk about with this team as well. But the QB question is the supreme question. If a team has a question mark at quarterback, it's what you're going to talk about, right? So
Yeah.
lots of names have been bandied about as who they might look to for quarterback help. We talked about earlier on today Anthony Richardson being a name that's been thrown in there. Aaron Rodgers has been a name that people have been throwing around, which as a Packers fan, him completing the Brett Favre journey and ending up in Minnesota would be hilarious.
Yeah.
I don't know that that one's the most likely to happen. Kyler Murray is another name that's been linked to them and is an interesting one. Malik Willis, Packers recently departing backup quarterback is another name. Pretty much any quarterback who's going somewhere is being linked to the Vikings right now. So it's a really interesting conversation as to who is the fit here.
It really is a interesting conversation because of all those things you just said. There's a lot of ways they can take this, right? If they want to bring in a dice roll of a potential starter in a Malik Willis, you can do that. Or Anthony Richardson, some high potential competition for JJ McCarthy. You could bring in a veteran, a Geno Smith, a Kyler Murray, a Aaron Rodgers. You could bring in a veteran to kind of give JJ McCarthy more time to sit, or at least push him and challenge him for that starting position, because I think the rest of the roster is in such good shape that you have to be thinking about higher aspirations while you have this window of the roster. So that's the biggest question, and no one knows the answer of what they're going to do about it.
I think one thing that's interesting in this whole conversation is that they are, who's the quarterback? Who's going to be the quarterback? And there's all this talk about bringing in guys like Kyler Murray, like Anthony Richardson, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, who are all quarterbacks that are, maybe they have a pedigree of past success or physical ability, et cetera, et cetera. But they have a guy there who has ability and talent. And why are we thinking that you need to give someone a second chance and not thinking to give the guy who's there a second chance?
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting question. And maybe this is a question that the Vikings shouldn't be asking. Maybe they should be just letting McCarthy, pick up somebody to be the backup, but let McCarthy have another crack at the can here.
Yeah. And he still has only started, I forget what the number is, like 11 games or something. So it's too early to tell with him. Like I said, showed progress towards the end of the season. I think they won like 4 or 5 of their last games or so. So like there is potential there. And I mean, if you're Justin Jefferson or an owner of Justin Jefferson, I'm sure you're frustrated by how the season went and what's going on there. But I watched Justin Jefferson, I think it was week 17, so it was like the second last week of the season. The Vikings are marching down the field. JJ McCarthy throws a perfect ball to Justin Jefferson back of the end zone, and he drops it. So like that's not on JJ McCarthy. That's on Justin Jefferson in that instance. So I think yes, another offseason, another step towards progress, I think is the plan. But at the same time, I've heard this conversation at length, and I don't know where I don't even know where I would land on how you supplement the quarterback room when it comes to him. But it's going to be the most interesting, I think, conversation piece between now and training camp is like how do they support JJ McCarthy and not let him feel like he's lost confidence, but at the same time you have to be more competitive at that position going into the season.
Yeah, you can't not have a quarterback. That's you can't have a question mark there.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting. I think it's going to tell us a lot about where they feel they're at with it as a team and how they go here. Like if you bring in the hardened veteran, that tells me that you think JJ McCarthy is the guy, but not yet. He needs some time. If you bring in a backup, depending on who that backup is, It also says JJ McCarthy is the guy, and maybe he just needs to be pushed a little bit more, right? Or if you bring in somebody like a Kyler Murray, that says JJ McCarthy is not the guy,
Yeah,
right? We'll bring in someone to replace him who is a baller, and we think that Kevin O'Connell can get more out of Kyler Murray than what Kyler Murray showed the last few years.
very much a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation they find
Mm-hmm.
themselves in. And there's a sliding glass door out there where they keep Sam Darnold and they're in the Super Bowl this year instead of the Seahawks.
And that's the big thing that Vikings fans, I'm sure, are kicking themselves over and over again all
Yeah,
off season. What if, what if, what if?
yeah. So we've already talked about Aaron Jones, probably on his way out the door. That running back room is sketchy at best without Aaron. Sketchy at best with Aaron Jones, so they're going to have to address it some way somehow. Maybe a potential landing spot for like a Tyler Algier. I would love that fit. I feel like I say that for Tyler Algier. Tyler Algier every single time I bring him up. I'm like, he's a really good running back, and I bet you he would fit in any team's roster and scheme if he just got the chance to make that move.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't
Um,
I don't disagree with that.
and Jordan Addison, probably not a lot to talk about. There's always a lot to talk about with him, but this being his third off season, he's potentially up for a contract extension.
Mhm.
I get the sense that's not going to be the case with him, just with more and more off-field stuff emerging.
Yeah, if he can keep himself out of off-field trouble, that might have been more of a possibility, but
Yeah,
that doesn't seem to be the case with him.
no. So I imagine they will not pick up his fifth-year option. He can still play this coming year on his rookie deal as his fourth year. So whatever happens after that is kind of up to him, I would say.
Mhm.
They are drafting at 18, right behind the Lions. Where would you go if you were the Vikings here?
I'm about to sound like a broken record, I think, but I wonder if you grab somebody for the secondary.
So
I think that speaks more to the draft class than anything, to be quite honest. So it certainly is something where they could fill and they could add to. You mentioned their defense was good, but that's the kind of thing that you can always improve on too, and maybe get a little
well,
bit more mileage out of that strength.
yeah, with Harrison Smith probably retiring, how would you feel about a Dylan Thieneman, that white safety who just ran a sub 4.4 at the combine? He's been mocked over
Uh,
many, many, many times, and not hopefully not just for obvious reasons as like, hey, athletic white guy playing safety, but um, he
Ever since Cooper DeJean opened the floodgates, right?
more and more of us, man, making a splash. Uh, I've seen that a bunch of times now, so I like that fit. Rangy safety, kind of like Harrison Smith, good
Mhm.
size, good speed to be able to affect things in the box as well. So I agree with you. Secondary needs help. You love what you got going in the front seven, and hopefully some progress comes along with Dallas Turner and some of these other edge rushers that you brought in. So two more teams to get through.
Mhm.
We'll finish with your squad, but
Yes.
let's talk about the Chicago Bears who won this division last year, seemingly another Cinderella, from rags to riches kind of thing here. Finished with a record of 11-6. Um, Certainly a Ben Johnson being dropped into that ecosystem gave it the shock that it needed. Where do you want to start with the Bears here?
Oof. I'm gonna have to be careful with how I phrase this because I might be accused of having some biases here as a Packers fan, but um, they lived on the edge last year, man. They won a lot of games that were right down to the wire, cardiac kids fashion, and that's not a recipe for long term success. So they need to find a way to be more consistent and not be in the situation where they're having to win with last minute plays and game winning drives and these sorts of things on a week by week basis. um, in terms of yeah, in terms of need, D line, they need some D line. They're yeah, 29th ranked defense against the run. Like that's not going to work for you long term.
No,
So
and it turned up in the playoffs. You could see that they were just getting road graded in a lot of their matchups.
Yeah, absolutely.
They the big so even during the season, Ben Johnson said at the podium like we are finding a way to win despite our passing game. So I think he was very um, he knew that things had to improve, you know, even better, excuse me, than they had already. So Caleb Williams took a huge step forward, wasn't taking as many sacks, was completing more passes. But that being said, as a Colston Loveland owner, I mean, you look at Caleb Williams and he's completing like 55% of his passes and he's making these miracle throws and these miracle plays, but he's still having trouble, almost like Anthony Richardson, completing the easy stuff.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I had this conversation with a friend of mine this offseason, and I said, I'd love to keep Colston Loveland, but I need Caleb Williams to complete 6 to 7% more of his passes. Like he can't be at 55% completion rate. He needs to be up at 65,
Mhm.
66, and that's just added production. And it's the simple things that will lead to that production because we know he's an incredible athlete, can make the
Mhm.
superhero plays. Now, continue to progress in your pocket presence and your pocket play so that the offense can stay on schedule and you don't have to save the day at the end of the fourth quarter.
Kind of an interesting wild card thing for them as well. Ozzy Trapillo, the injury that he suffered in the playoffs is going to keep him out for most of the season next year
Yes,
as well. So that's going to be something that they'll need to think about in terms of shoring up that position as well.
absolutely. Yeah,
Something uh, when it comes to Caleb Williams performing and being consistent, you need to have the protection around him too, right?
100%. And they had brought in a Jonah Jackson, I think it was, initially to be that left tackle, and he just couldn't perform. So maybe he takes a step forward. But yeah, like they're drafting at 25. You're probably not finding a tackle in this class worthy of starting at 25. So uh, we'll get to that. Let's talk about some of these weapons. In a crowded and embarrassment of riches they have at skill positions, do you think they're going to re-sign or extend DeAndre Swift? Because Kyle Managnai obviously came on strong. I have to imagine. I think Roshan Johnson's still there. I do they want to afford paying DeAndre Swift again?
I am just pulling up their cap actually, just to have a look at this. Because yeah, in terms of their situation, um, with the moves that they probably want to make, you're maybe thinking that that's a position where you could maybe save a little bit of money there.
Okay.
Um, but I mean, I'm always in favor of having more depth at the skill positions as well, just because injuries are a thing and losses in the playoffs and these sorts of things. You want to have that next person up to fill those roles. Um, I do love what they have going on with their tight end situation in terms of Loveland. I love the depth that they have there. Cole Kmet being there as well. So it'll be interesting to see how they manage that and whether they choose to try and restructure people, or whether they try to whether they let a few bodies go.
Yeah,
It's an interesting question mark.
word on the street from what I've heard is that Cole Kmet could be a cut candidate just to
Mhm.
save some money.
Mhm.
DeAndre Swift, I think he'll be a longer conversation only because he finally looked like a decent running back last year. Like
Mhm.
was actually able to find the right gap to run through. Showed explosiveness. He finished as a top 20 running back this past season, I believe, like running back 16 or something, splitting time with a Kyle Manungai. So I think as long as he's not asking for too much of a raise, you could probably keep him around, and I wouldn't mind that because giving another weapon to that backfield, I think is going to be good. Ben Johnson wants to run the ball. He came from Detroit where he had flash and thunder, so I think you're going to want to see that continue with a DeAndre Swift and Manungai kind of combo back there, much to us dynasty managers' chagrin.
Mhm.
So that's my 2 cents on
Yeah.
DeAndre Swift. The other player, unless there's something you want to say about that.
I was just going to just kind of jump in there quickly with this while we're having this conversation about money and contracts. This is the hockey fan coming out in me. I always like thinking about cap stuff.
Yeah.
Um, Williams has 2 more years left on his deal. And what kind of a contract is he going to command when that comes up for negotiation, right? So you do have an opportunity here right now to maybe take on some extra dollars in these other positions while you still have your quarterback at an affordable rate, because in a couple of years he's going to be making
60 plus.
$60+ million. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a very good point, and that's the beauty of a rookie contract in the NFL at the quarterback position. DJ Moore,
Mm-hmm.
again, as a fan of Roma Dunze and as an owner of Colston Loveland, I could do with a few less receiving weapons on the roster. So DJ Moore getting shipped out to the Raiders makes a lot of sense. Getting shipped out to Denver makes a lot of sense as an explosive downfield guy. I think DJ Moore's time in Chicago has come to an end. It was fun
Mm-hmm.
while it lasted, and they've obviously backfilled him with these picks over the past 2 years in Roma Dunze and Luther Burden, a receiving weapon like Colston Loveland, and a couple other players that they're high on. So I wouldn't be surprised if he gets traded early on in this cycle, because I don't think you can cut him. His contract's too big, but
Mm-hmm.
a needy team that could use an established veteran receiver to kind of help a rookie quarterback in Mendoza, I think that would be a lot of sense on both sides of the table there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And yeah, they are lucky that they've had these younger weapons emerge and be successful for them. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he lands.
Yeah.
Are we moving on to what are we taking with their draft pick here?
Yes, please.
I am going to not say secondary here for the first time.
Okay.
I think they need help on the D line, especially something for the pass rush, an edge, something along those lines to help there.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Offense is set. You're not going to get a tackle at that point in the draft, and this is a very good defensive tackle, defensive end
Mm-hmm.
sort of draft. So you can find something there that'll help that room in my mind
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
You got to stop the run. You got to have somebody who can plug things up there, right?
Yes.
So, yeah.
All right, let's get into it. I honestly didn't put too many notes down here because I wanted you to riff poetic when it comes to your Packers. So where do you want to start with them?
Oh boy, where do I start with my Packers? I think the biggest thing to start with my Packers is the injuries that we suffered over the course of the year. We were 9-3-1 when Micah Parsons went down. And that's around the time too where we lost Tucker Kraft. We lost a lot of our other players to injuries that maybe didn't keep them out, but certainly slowed them down. Christian Watson was down for a while there as well.
Jaden Reed after week 1.
Jaden Reed was out from week 1 as well. Yeah, that's an underrated factor too. So I think just being healthy is something that is going to hopefully make a difference for the Packers going forward this year. Hopefully, touch wood, that is something that happens. Having said that, there are a lot of question marks that I have about the team going into this year as well. Parsons isn't going to be back for a little bit next year. Like he's definitely going to miss probably the first couple of games. And even when he comes back, you're not going to be yourself for a little bit. I think we need to set our expectations in check for him next year. I think it's probably not until later in the season, if at all next year, that he starts to look like the Micah Parsons that we all know and love.
Right.
And that's something that we'll have to consider. And without him, our defense is something that I have a lot of question marks about. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but
once Micah Parsons went down, I think teams realized they could just wreak havoc amongst your front seven. Like I forget what I think it might have been the Bears who ran for over 250 yards on you guys, or for some team like that. That there was no run defense along that front seven, and I've heard, was it Kenny Clark that got sent to the Cowboys?
Yeah, yeah,
Imagine he gets cut by the Cowboys and picked back up by the Packers. Like, so
yeah.
that's a potential solution. Um, but yeah, like the defense was outmatched with the injuries that kind of befell them, and then the offense didn't have the weapons that it had at the beginning of the season to kind of keep up with a lot of these shootouts. So I think
Mhm.
to your point, health will be a big part of it. Getting Christian Watson, I think, is a huge winner in all this. Coming back from that
Mhm.
ACL as quickly as he did and looking as good as he did, I mean, he's going to be a riser in a lot of dynasty rankings. Um, the only note I have here is Romeo Dobbs. Like, I can't imagine the Packers are going to hold on to him with
No,
other receivers. Yeah,
his days as a Packer are probably done. And we the wide receiver room's pretty packed there. Um, it'll be interesting to see how they use those weapons on offense. And that's one thing where from 2 years ago to last year, I really noticed a difference. The offense 2 years ago seemed to be one that really took advantage of the variety of weapons that we had and really just ran the ball, moved the
yeah,
ball, like made progress by trucking it up the field. Guys like Christian Watson were rushing the ball 2 years ago,
right.
and it was a dynamic offense in that regard. And we moved away from that for whatever reason last year. So it'll be interesting to see how the play calling develops moving forward. It seemed to me in a lot of games last year, you know, that playoff game, for instance, is one that really stands out to me. We got ahead, we had a big lead, and then we started playing not to lose rather than playing to win. And the calling was really conservative, and it turned around and bit us. There was a lot of smoke on the coaching staff at the end of the year last year. They really didn't do too much in the way of changes. LaFleur's back, and our offensive coordinator's back. Most of the faces are going to be familiar ones. So did they learn from that? Are we going to adjust, or do we need to be actually making some changes there? That's something that I think is a big thing to look at for the Packers this year.
Well, I don't know the names off the top of my head, but I have to imagine. I think there was a couple Packers coordinators or coaches that got um, like sniped or otherwise by other teams this offseason for other coaching positions. Jeff Halfley, I think it is, that got picked up by the Dolphins. Was he the defensive guy
Yeah,
on your team? Okay, so I mean, you guys aren't, you know, ready to raid the castle over his repositioning. Probably,
no,
yeah. So,
no.
um, yeah, I think the Packers. The great thing about your franchise is that because there is no single owner, um, they can kind of take the long view on a lot of these things. They unfortunately have no first round pick due to the Michael Parsons
Mhm,
trade, but they've drafted well in the past. I mean, you guys always find an offensive lineman in the third round or later, and
mhm,
you just draft and develop, which you guys are able to do because there's not that outside or not that inside pressure to like perform now or you're going to get your ass fired. It's like
yeah.
you guys stick to the process, and I think you guys will be right there in the mix again next year.
Speaking of the process, that is the one thing I am very happy about is that Jordan Love is him. We did it again. We found another franchise quarterback, and I think if last year proved anything through all of this, it's that we can feel pretty confident with Jordan Love going forward. He's got the ability to take this team where it needs to go, provided they put the all the right pieces in place around him. He's not quite to the level of an Aaron Rodgers where he can carry a subpar team to the promised land, but he's certainly good enough to get the job done.
Where do you land on Matthew Golden? Because they finally picked a first round wide receiver, and there was already a lot of speculation that he probably was not a first round wide receiver. But then he did have that playoff game where he really showed out. and like
Mhm.
looked like the highlight reel that I remember from Matthew Golden. So where do you land on him? Maybe a Romeo Dobbs moving on opens up that
Yeah,
opportunity.
I think that is the fill in there for Romeo Dobbs moving out in terms of he steps into a bigger role. I think he was underutilized last year. I think, watching their games throughout the year, he had those flashes throughout the year where that talent showed. His ability to be a threat down the field. The first number of games, it seemed like every game there was a deep ball in Golden's direction that just missed, that was just a little bit off in terms of the connection, or a good defensive play broke it up, something along those lines. But I think he has the capability of being another really good wide receiver in this offense. I think Christian Watson is the one in this situation, but I think Golden probably ends up being the number two. I think
Yeah.
he'll, hopefully, if the coaching staff uses him and he continues to perform like we saw, he'll step into that number two option role.
Yeah. Still one of the youngest teams in the NFL. So
Mm-hmm. Lots to be hopeful for. As a Packers fan, I feel pretty good about a lot of things, which is
absolutely.
nice because I'm also a Leafs fan, and it's good to have balance in life, right?
Of course, yeah. It would be just misery otherwise. Um,
Exactly.
that's awesome, and we'll close it up there, folks. We'll get another episode out towards the end of this week, probably tackling another division and just seeing how the first leg of free agency opens up. I think that officially starts tomorrow, so we'll be all eyes on that, and we'll keep you up to date on those things and give you our thoughts on how things have shifted because of those moves. But thank you, Bobby, of course, for joining us tonight and into the future. Happy to hear you're feeling better. Um, yeah, uh, excited to have a co-host back again, and I don't have to
Good to
just
be
get.
back.
I feel like by the time I'm done a solo episode, my voice is just so gone. Like I can feel the raspiness starting to attack me by the end of an episode. So it's nice to have a little break in between and let someone else do some talking. So it's great to have you back and you're feeling better. And yeah, looking forward to talking more ball as the off season marches forward.
Excited for it.
All right, that's going to do it for us, everyone. Thanks for watching. If you've made it this far, obviously subscribe. If you're enjoying it, leave us your comments. Leave us what you think these teams need and what moves you would make potentially to help fill your team's holes. And yeah, we're going to be here all season long, just going about our business and enjoying the great sport that is football. So we're signing off now. We'll see you later. Thanks again. Peace.